Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Monica Williamson and I'm the Engagement Associate at SMU Data Arts. I would also like to take a moment to introduce my colleague, Dan Gordon, who is our Support Center Manager, to our webinar. He will be facilitating and managing our chat and Q&A. As we get started with our Building Block series, we'd like to kick us off with a little bit of housekeeping. First, we're going to keep everyone on mute during the presentation, and that is to ensure good sound quality. We also ask that you take a moment to explore some of the features within Zoom. First, the Q&A feature, where you are welcome to add any questions that you have about today's content at any point in time. Again, feel free to utilize the Q&A for any questions. We also have the chat feature available, which will allow you to reach out to our team to help troubleshoot any technology issues that you may be experiencing. We also like to use the chat feature to drop links that may be helpful as we go throughout our presentation. And finally, you are welcome to utilize the closed captioning feature. To turn on closed captioning, you'll find your Zoom dashboard and click the CC icon, and that will turn on your closed captioning. You'll then be prompted to view closed caption via subtitles or by live transcript. You'll also see a subtitles settings tab, and you're welcome to make adjustments as you need to. Again, feel free to utilize the chat feature to communicate with us if you need help with any of the features that I've just mentioned. And finally, after this session, we will send you a follow-up email with a couple of resources that we'll mention today during the presentation. We'll also provide a link to a recording of today's webinar so that you can re-review this or share it with a colleague who was unable to join us, and a link to a brief survey to get your feedback and experience during our presentation. Before we do get going, I would like to note that all of the information that we're sharing today is targeted to newer organizations, unaudited organizations, organizations with smaller budgets, or for folks who are less familiar or completely unfamiliar with nonprofit financial management. So the material that we will go through will be presented on a basic level, and that is on purpose. If you find that you're not one of those folks, we do hope that you stay, and we do hope that you'll be able to fill in some of the gaps in your financial knowledge, or think of a colleague who could benefit from watching a recording of today's webinar. With that, I'll get going. We'll start by taking a look inward. Our work revolves around creativity and culture, but understanding how finances work is key to successfully managing your day-to-day activities and planning for your organization's future. You'll need to know things like, how do you record all of the personal contributions you make to your organization or project? How much will it cost if you offer 3 programs next year instead of your usual 2? How much should you charge for online programs? And if you make payments optional for those programs, will you make enough to cover your costs? And you may even find yourself asking questions like, does your organization or project look attractive to donors and grant makers? Financial data can help you answer questions like these and provide insight to help you make effective decisions. There are multiple ways that data is used for financial management, ranging from how you keep track of the data in the first place to the various reports your board reviews at every meeting. We like to think of those different ways of using financial data as building blocks for financial health. Tools, methods, and best practices that you can use to help you get your organization on a solid financial footing and stay there. Today's session will focus on the importance of building blocks, and that's the annual budget process. Before we jump into that, however, I would like to take a moment to share a brief overview of our organization. SMU Data Arts is a program of the Meadows School of Arts at Southern Methodist University. And here you can see a little bit about what we do. We build capacity for data use within the sector. We collect, high quality longitudinal data on the sector. We develop data collection methods to respond to evolving sector needs, and we provide insights from the data that people can use. Here are our goals for today's webinar. And by the end of today's session, I hope that you'll be able to understand the importance of creating an annual budget, know how to create and use a budget template and add numbers to your budget, know how to analyze a budget and make mid-year course corrections, and finally, we'll leave you with some resources on the topic to explore with staff and board members. Many of you may find yourself coming to this workshop with different roles at your organization, different missions, different capacities, but with few exceptions, no matter what your role is at your organization, your job most likely intersects with your organization's finances in some way. You may be a fundraiser, or you could be the person that does all of the financial data entry, or you may be the program manager who looks at financial reports on a regular basis. No matter what your role, because your work touches on the financial side of the organization, the overarching goal for many data arts workshops is to help you understand and embrace financial data and the financial process. So let's get started with our first building block, and that's budgeting basics. Now, I'm going to take a bit of a wild leap here and guess that we all know what a budget is. It's a short-term financial plan which lists money coming in and how much everything you need or want to spend money on will cost, and a bottom line, and your projected surplus or deficit for the year. In theory, we know we're supposed to make and follow an annual budget at work, but you may have never really learned how budgeting works or how to make one. This happens all the time to nonprofits where we come in with our passion for our mission, but maybe a little low on business experience. And sometimes we're even a little embarrassed about our lack of business knowledge or financial skills. And we may not even know what questions to ask or where to begin. That's why we're starting at the very beginning with the basics of budgeting. Though there are different types and levels to budgets, we're going to focus our annual organization budget, which covers the timeline of your 12-month fiscal year. First, why do you think you need to make a budget anyway? Here's a few reasons. One, knowing that you have to put a dollar value on something forces you to examine all aspects of your project, programs, or your organization as a whole. It's a great moment to take stock of the financial impacts of everyone you employ and everything that you have and everything that you do. Actually, writing down all of the money that's coming in and all of your regular expenditures and calculating a bottom line or a surplus or deficit can give you peace of mind that you'll be able to pay your bills or highlight moments of shortfall that you need to prepare for. And crafting a budget is a time to think about goals for your organization. These could be long-term goals or short-term, and work out how to make those goals financially possible. And finally, writing out a budget and then a monthly or quarterly at the end of the year and comparing your budget numbers to your actual numbers gives you great information to help you plan for future years and monitor your progress towards achieving your goals and help you course correct if necessary. I said a moment ago that a budget is a financial plan. Plan is the key word here. Budgets contain projected numbers only, how much you think you're going to spend and how much you think you're going to receive. This is different from a financial statement or a financial report, which contains actual information about how much you actually spent and how much actually came in the door. I emphasize this because language is important. And I know that you know this, but when you're reporting to donors and grantors about your year, you'll always want to use actual information. When you're telling grantors or your supporters about plans, project plans, the financial aspect of your organization's goals, that's when you'll like to use your budget. Because a budget is a plan, to carry out the plan, your budget for your next fiscal year should be finalized before the end of your current fiscal year. Ideally, you'll start preparing your budget for the next year about 2 to 3 months before the end of your previous fiscal year. After the organization has thought about or set specific goals for the year ahead, so if your fiscal year ends on June 30th, you may want to begin working on your budget in early April to give you time to review and make revisions and have the budget approved by the full board before the end of your fiscal year. And I know this sounds very obvious, but the larger your organization is, the more departments and programs you maybe have. And you may find that there are more moving parts within your budgeting process, and it could take a bit longer. So do plan accordingly. Why do you need so long to make a budget, you may be asking? As you'll see in a moment, you may need several iterations of a budget. You may need to do some research, a bit of brainstorming, and have some review sessions with your board or finance committee to make sure you can achieve programmatic and financial goals. Leave yourself plenty of time so that you can create a great financial roadmap for your organization. So, how do you make a budget for your organization? Strange but true, creating a budget doesn't actually start with numbers. It actually starts with a list of items or a budget template. I don't know if you're like this, but I'm a list maker. And so I make a shopping list before I go to the grocery store every time I try to. And if I don't make a list, I will honestly forget something, and dinner may be a little bit different from how I imagined it. And budgeting can work in the same way. Start with a broad list of everything that goes on at your organization, all of your programs, all of the ways that money comes in the door, and all of the things you spend your money on, and all of the people you pay or wish you could pay to do something. Then you'll add details, as many as you can think of for each item. Ask everyone at your organization for help with this part so you don't forget something. Notice with this example list that there are items that seem similar. The next step is to wrangle all of the items, combine similar items, review, and overall organize items. Because with any list, a budget is easier to use when it's well organized. Think about the shopping list parallel again for a moment. One thing I notice about my shopping list is that when I make them, I write things down as I think of them and in no particular order. Then, once I'm at the store, I have to constantly check and recheck my random list to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Inevitably, just when I think I'm almost done, I have to run back to the back of the grocery store to an aisle where I forgot something because it was separate from the other like items on my list. But if I had actually taken just a few minutes to organize my list so that all of the vegetables were in the same place and all of the dairy and the baking ingredients, etc., I actually could have gotten through the store without backtracking. The same could be true for your budget. Once you have your detailed list of activities, the next step is putting them with like items. These lines and these categories are the foundation to your budget. Okay, one more parallel shopping example. I often find myself grocery shopping after a full day of work. At that moment, I have no idea what I need and what I want to eat that night, and possibly let alone for the next week. But the internet is full of grocery lists like this. And all you have to do is find one that suits you or make a similar list in Excel and then customize it with all of the things that you generally shop for. Every time you need to shop, just print out your custom list or tear a page off of a pad and check some boxes and you're all set. You can do that with budgets too. There are many nonprofit budget templates out there. And what I like about them is that they're a great starting point. Not necessarily the right set of lines for your organization, but a list that you can add to and modify and change until you hit on all of the things that are right for you. You will receive a template, an SMU Data Arts template, budget template, and our follow-up communication. So I do want to share that that is a resource that we'll be excited to share with you going forward. And whether you find yourself making your own list of revenue and expense areas, or start with a ready-made template, the result is one that everyone at your organization should use, whether they're creating a departmental budget, a project budget for a grant, or a budget for the whole organization. It's one you should use every year at the budget time. Once you have your list or your template ready, it's time to bring money into the picture and add dollar amounts to your budget. How do we do that? First, if yours is a multi-person organization, even if some of those folks are volunteers or board members, get them involved. Spread the work of budgeting out among staff or board members who are most familiar with the key areas of your organization. This will help you get better information, feedback, ideas, and buy-in. And it will encourage dialogue about what should happen at your organization next year and set up accountability for achieving budget goals. Give everyone a copy of your master template. Assign them an area of the organization to work on, maybe a project or a department, and have them fill it in. Everyone using the same template, even if they leave lines that do not apply to them blank, ensure that you will be able to gather and use information easily. And use everyone's information to make an organizational budget. For each line, whether it's revenue or expense, enter either the amount you think you will receive or the amount you will spend in your next fiscal year. And then jot down some notes or some assumptions that led you to those numbers. If you have a budget from the previous year, before you add in any numbers for next year, review last year's budget and your most recent financial results for each revenue and expense line. Compare each budgeted line in your actual finance results to the date and record the differences between the two. This is called variance analysis. As you go through each line and note where there are differences or variance, make sure you understand why the budgeted numbers are different from the actual numbers. There could be differences because your fiscal year isn't over yet and you're still expecting to spend or receive money. Maybe something didn't come in that you thought would. Maybe you expected a program to bring in 100 paying attendees, but it only brought in 50. Or something unexpected could happen, like a global crisis. Here's an example using expenses. If you budgeted to spend $100 on program supplies, but you actually spent $200, the variance or the difference between those two numbers is negative 100. You spent $100 more than you thought you would. Here's the analyst part. Did you spend more money because you forgot to budget for some of the supplies that you needed? Or did you spend more money because prices were higher than you anticipated? And did you spend more because you thought you were going to offer a program 3 times, but you actually ended up doing it 6? So you needed twice as many supplies as you originally expected. Going through an exercise of understanding each variance will help you not only understand what happened last year, but Also helps you think about whether those circumstances could apply to the next year, and ultimately help you decide what amount to put in each budget line. If your organization didn't have a budget last year, or if you added new programs or new lines to your budget template, and you don't have prior year information to guide you, rather than make educated guesses about numbers to add into the lines into question, do a bit of homework and research to help you put in a budget figure. Let's say your organization plans to produce a one-woman show. It can be done online or in person, so it's a good option to put into the plan next year. Right now, there's a budget figure of $10,000 in there. Where did that number come from? Now, I've made that number up, of course, but in a perfect world, before you add a number like that, you would like to have a conversation with the performer and have a negotiated amount to include, or at least have decided internally what's the maximum amount that you can pay anyone for their performance. If you don't have any information that precise, take some time to talk to colleagues who have had similar programs and ask how much they've paid their performance, or anything along those lines. Doing this kind of homework takes more time, but it will result in more accurate information into your budget. And just a reminder, especially for new items, make sure to jot down in the notes and assumptions so you know how you arrived at those numbers later on. If your organization doesn't change very much from year to year in terms of staffing and programming, beginning with last year's budget and doing variance analysis and making small changes based on that analysis to come up with your new budget may be all that you need to do. And this is called incremental budgeting. But the reality is that most of our organizations do change every year in big ways or in small ways. Or there are ways that we would like to impact change and goals that we would like to achieve. Maybe your organization is trying to build back a reserve after the crisis of this past few years. Or maybe you have goals related to equity that you would like to have in your budget. Each of these changes or goals will have an impact on your budget. So let's look at a couple of examples. Maybe your board has given you the directive to achieve at least $10,000 in surplus next year so that you can have a cushion against future emergencies. Before you can make any adjustments to your budget, you need to have discussions with the board and with staff about how you're going to achieve that goal. Maybe through fundraising, increased earned revenue, decreased expenses, or a combination of the three. And then adjust those detailed lines in your budget. Maybe you've applied for and received a grant to fund your goal of expanding the online classes you offer beyond regular business hours to evening hours and weekends. This means making changes to several budgeted lines. On the revenue side of your budget, you'll need to include the grant revenue and any additional tuition fees that you expect to receive. On the expense side, you'll need to do a bit of math and maybe a little research to figure out how to adjust the expense lines in your budget. You'll need to figure out how much you'll have to pay staff to teach those additional courses and whether you'll need additional supplies for those new courses. And if you have enough hours within your current online meeting account to cover the additional classes, or if you'll need to upgrade. Once you have the answers to these questions, you'll be able to fill in or adjust your budget lines accordingly. Another budget method is called a zero-based budget, which is tantamount to a fresh start every year. What does that mean? So for example, if last year you spent 75% of your program budget on program A and 25% of your budget on program B, the zero-based budget method doesn't assume you'll have the same split of expenditures next year, but that you'll build the new program budget from scratch, thinking about your goals and plans for each program in the next year. That includes program priorities, connection to mission, and new programs that you would like to add. Last year's results may inform this year's budget, but each line and expense percentage needs to be considered, especially in light of revenue expectations. So I'll just broadly outline 3 budgeting methods. Incremental budgeting, which is making small changes to line items based on variance analysis. Goal-based budgeting, and zero-based budgeting, as if they were completely separate methods and that you have to choose one. But in reality, most organizations create their own hybrid model of all of these 3 scenarios and the way that they best work for them. There's no hard or fast rule for what's right. No one true way to budget. But once you hit a solution that works for your organization, the key is to use it consistently year to year. No matter what method you use to enter numbers, rarely is budgeting ever done in one round. The next crucial step is to review and analyze. You'll need to consider things like, does this budget meet program goals, department goals, and organizational goals? And if it doesn't, do you need to adjust your numbers or adjust your goal, or maybe both? Think about whether the numbers are plausible and accurate. For example, if your budget projects a $50,000 deficit, before you adjust your budget to simply add $50,000 to your individual donations so that you can break even, check your records first. If your donation history says you typically get around $5,000 from individual donors, suddenly getting $50,000 is unlikely, and you may be better off reducing expenses instead. And finally, think about whether you have the capacity to achieve this budget with the resources you have right now and that you've budgeted for. Do you have the staff, equipment, and space that you need, or is something missing from your budget? As you're doing your review, highlight any items that are likely but unconfirmed, or put on your procrastination hat and think about the big picture in terms of any kind of situation that may affect your whole organization. This could be anything from a grant that you thought for sure was a sure thing that doesn't come through, to the effects of our COVID-19 crisis and having the vaccine enable a return to regular programming in the mid-year. These sorts of events going one way or another will have a big impact on your organization. So be ready, whatever happens. You may want to prepare several situational scenarios that play out eventually. Choose the most likely one for your final budget. But just in case things don't happen the way you think they will, be ready and have a backup plan. Once you've done a complete review, made any changes, and decided between scenarios, make sure the board reviews and approves the final budget. This will become the basis of monitoring results throughout the year. Once your budget is approved, the new year begins and sets up a process for regularly monitoring your budget against your actual results to see how you're doing. Ideally, you'll do this on a monthly basis. To make this work, your financial statements, and whether you use Excel, QuickBooks, or any other accounting software, must use the same lines as your budget template. This is key. Every month, do the same kind of variance analysis that we talked about earlier. Compare budgets to actual and make sure you understand the variances. Some will just be timing issues. Something hasn't happened yet, but it will, or because your budget has annual amounts, you only incur expenses 1 month at a time. This is perfectly normal. Some variants are only small changes from what you expected. This is also typical, especially since we tend to use round numbers in a budget. But some variances are significant and will have impacts across the organization and may require budgeting changes. If your monthly variance analysis uncovers significant divergence from your budget, you may choose to watch something for a month or two. But if the variants are large enough and persistent, it may be time for some budget changes. If the variances you've identified are due to one of those likely but unconfirmed events, maybe you already have another budget scenario that you can shift to. But let's take a typical example for our time. What if something happens mid-year, like say the pandemic, and you have to close your doors for a while? What now? I'm sure some of you went through this process at the start of the pandemic and know it better than I do. But when this kind of drastic event happens, or if your variance analysis shows that you are just on a new path and won't get back on course that you intended before the year started, it's time for a mid-year reforecast procedure. How does that work? Start with your year-to-date actual figures. If you already know the event is big enough to warrant a reforecast, we're going to continue using the pandemic as an example. You don't need to do any variance analysis. You know things have changed. Then jot down some notes about your new assumptions or goals. Just like you did with your budget, if you have a multi-person staff or a board that takes on some of the organization's work, get folks involved in the conversation so you can consider all aspects of your organization. Consider which programs will continue unchanged and which will go, and which programs will need modifications. You'll also consider how will the changes in programs affect revenue and expenses? Which expenses disappear if staff are working from home and which will stay? And how do these changes intersect with your organization's goal? And how will those overall goals need changing? Once you have a new set of assumptions, just as we outlined earlier in the initial budgeting process, begin to add your new numbers. And once all of your numbers are in, do your review and analysis. Look at your new surplus and deficit calculation. Is it positive or negative? Are the new numbers realistic? And do you need to make more changes or create new scenarios to cover various alternatives? Once you've set a new budget, make sure the board understands and approves all of the changes. Before we wrap up, now that we've covered a budget cycle from creation to analyst to mid-year corrections, I want to mention a few other budgeting ideas and best practices. Depending on the size and complexity of your organization, you may need different levels of a budget. A program budget for each of your organization's programs, a project budget, which may incorporate several programs, as well as the whole organizational budget. All of these programs and projects and detailed budgets should use the same line items as the organizational budget. If you need or want more details on a program or project budget, make sure they roll up to a line in the main budget. The typical way to make a program or project budget is to add a column for each program to the main organizational budget. Looking at a budget this way can also help you allocate some organizational expenses to various programs. And even though annual budgets cover an entire fiscal year, to help you with variance analysis, it's useful to budget month by month. Making a monthly budget can help you figure out your needs in any given month, and it's really key to helping you understand and think about cash flow. For example, if your expenses are about the same every month, rent, salaries, insurance payments, etc., but your revenue comes in several times of the year, but not every month, if you know when the revenue is coming in, you can estimate how long you'll need to make that revenue last to cover your expenses going forward, and whether you'll have enough money left over for one-time expenses like program supplies or independent contractor fees. Now, before I sum up, I just want to acknowledge that with all of these lines and columns I'm proposing, a simple budget document for your small organization or project is suddenly sounding complicated and maybe even overwhelming. So please remember a few things. You get to decide how your budget looks. If you're new to the formal budgeting process, you may not want or need to have more than a single column for annual revenue and expenses for each line. If adding more detail sounds like a good idea, but you just can't do it now, just keep these ideas in a place where you can find them and plan to add a little bit more detail to your budget each year over the next several years. But the more detail that you add to your budget up front, the more you can learn from your financial information later on. So, what are key takeaways from the annual budgeting process? First, we recommend that you leave time for the process. Start the budget for the next year at least 2 to 3 months before the end of the current year so that you have time for research and more than one revision before you have a final product. Also, set goals for the next year and build your budget thinking about what you need to do and spend to achieve those goals. Get your staff involved. Have staff members work on the budget for their area, or at least work with you. Give them a template to work with so that you know it will fit seamlessly into the main organizational budget. And then work with them as you make revisions to their program budgets so they know what they'll have to work with or what revenue goals they have for their programs. Get the board approval for your budget. The board is responsible for setting the direction of your organization, and approving the annual budget is a part of their responsibilities. And do monthly variance analysis so that you have early warnings that changes are afoot or that course corrections may be necessary. And know that it's okay to make mid-year revisions to your budget. Some years, like 2020, for example, do not go as planned. And if you know that big changes are necessary, sit down with your staff and board and agree on some of those changes. And finally, remember that a budget is just a plan. It is not a guarantee of what will happen next year or how much something will cost. It's just a jumping off point. The typical way to make a program, I'm going to pause right there and share that we have some additional budgeting resources, and we'll share these links with you as we go through our follow-up communications. And I do want to share a bit of tools and resources. So many of you are familiar with our cultural data platform and our suite of analytic tools. Our suite of analytic reports allows you to benchmark your data against your peers and see patterns by analyzing your years of trend data, or simply have ready-made data and visuals grouped around specific topics of areas for your board meetings. The KIPI dashboard helps you understand your financial and operating performance relative to similar organizations in key areas and takes into account your location, population size, discipline, access to funding, and many other factors. KIPPs are a great conversation starter about all of the intangible things that contribute to your organization's success. All of these tools are free on our SMU Data Arts dashboard and through our platform. If you still would like to learn more about using data in general, we've also developed a series of free online courses about data literacy. These are courses that you can take at any time. They're meant to help you use data more effectively, and that includes all kinds of data. There are 4 courses currently available, and they cover the specifics of how data can be useful in the different areas of your work. The courses cover using data in decision-making, financial data essentials, using data to build relationships with your audience and donors, and using data in advocacy work. We also have many videos of our aforementioned courses at our SMU Data Arts Vimeo. And finally, as we shift into our Q&A portion, I do want to share a friendly reminder about our next 2 building blocks sessions. Registration is still open and you're welcome to join to continue building upon the knowledge that we've learned today. Now that's going to bring us to our Q&A, and I'll pause and lean on Dan to kind of jump in to help facilitate the questions that we've received during our time.
Thank you so much, Monica. Team, please continue to put questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom meeting. We did get an interesting question about non-calendar fiscal years. And essentially, it's not a problem to have a non-calendar fiscal year. Many organizations do that to follow along with the natural course of their programming. This organization was following the school year. It is just that you will report your fiscal year end date as the day before your fiscal year starts. So if you have a September 1 start date, August 31st will be your fiscal year end date. And that is the date that you would report in your CDP and the date that you would report in your 990 as well. There's also a function in the CDP, if you are a user, where you can add a short year or a stub year so that you can make up the difference in months if needed. If you have any issues or trouble with that at all, please feel free to reach out to the support center. We would be very happy to walk you through. I think that's the end of all the questions that we have right now, but if you do have any more, please feel free to continue to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Dan. As we kind of close up our webinar space, I do want to invite our colleagues to drop in our evaluation link in the chat if you would like to provide us with some quick feedback before we send that follow-up email. We would love to get your thoughts about today's webinar and our presentation. And as a final reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up communication that will provide many of the links that we've talked about today, along with our SMU Data Arts template, budgeting template, and it'll also include some information about chart of accounts. With that, I would like to thank you all for your amazing and thoughtful questions. We do hope today's presentation was informative and helpful. Again, please feel free to reach out to our amazing support center. We've provided their information on the screen. They are open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You're welcome to call or to send them an email. Before we close out our webinar space, I do want to do one last check with Dan to see if any last minute questions have come in.
Thanks so much, Monica. No, we're pretty good. I guess I would leave the users here with the information that if you are in our product, the CDP, and you're feeling frustrated or you're not quite sure what's happening next, we are standing by. We love to help. And please reach out often and soon, because we'd hate to think of you not knowing what your next step is when we can help you through that and get the information that you need.
Thank you, Dan. A last reminder of our next building block for financial health, which is chart of accounts, which will be next Tuesday, July 20th. And our final webinar will be on metrics and working capital, which will be Tuesday, July 27th. We do hope you're able to join us. We'll remain on our webinar space for just a few more moments to answer any final questions. However, if you do not have any questions, feel free to log off. Thank you for joining, and we hope you have a wonderful day. We will now be closing our webinar space. Have a wonderful day.